Hi, this is PubShorts episode number 1. No more I Cite Yous. My name is Dr. KK. I am the Innovation Officer at Enago, and I have with me Tony. Tony, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, KK. Yes, I'm Tony O'Rourke, and I'm a vice president here at Enago, and I look after our publisher, mostly in society relationships.
Right. So, Tony, a brief introduction. I think our audience might be watching or listening in for the first time. So, Pub Shots is our new show that we are live streaming on YouTube. This is the start because, Tony, you and I, offline and online, as in various meetings, we talk about the latest happenings in the world of publishing, in the world
Yeah,
of AI and language technology. So, we decided that we will have a show where we can continue that sort of exchange and communicate and
ab-
present it to the rest of the masses. Yeah.
absolutely right. And we're committed to educating authors, educating researchers, improving the quality of the work that they do. We have this academy which does great work in supporting authors. So this is an excellent extension to that, I think.
Yes. So for those who are new to, let's say, Inago and Trinka, and we should probably introduce it. Tony, could you
Yeah,
explain
good idea.
what Inago is and how we help authors and publishers and everything? Yeah.
Okay, so the 30-second elevator pitch. We're a language services business. Our business is to help communicate research.
Right.
In practical terms, what that means is typically an author whose first language isn't English sends us their content either for editing or translation to make it as good as any paper at least from a language perspective,
Right.
that's written by an author whose first language is English. So it's editing, translation. We also provide all sorts of tools and products which support the communication of research.
Right. And so I'll try to quickly explain. Maybe Tony, you can add to it what Trinka is. Trinka, we call Trinka the complete writing assistant. It's an AI based, let's say, language grammar checker, specifically trained, and it is meant for academicians and academic text and technical writing specifically. But that is not only the thing that we have under the brand Trinka. We have a reading assistant that we call Enago Read. We have reports that many publishers use for evaluating manuscripts and submissions coming
Yeah.
in. We have a lot of products. We have an AI content detector, lots of things. So Tony, you introduce Trinka and the various other AI brands to publishers. So could you summarize your experience and how
Oh,
publishers react?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I have conversations on a virtually a daily basis with publishers about different ways these AI tools can be used. Whether it's a publisher looking to support authors with submitting papers for the first time and just doing things to help with language and with maybe the structure of their papers. Also working with publishers to improve some of their workflow efficiencies once papers have been received and how they pass through peer review. And helping to make sure that a paper is as good as possible before it goes into peer review or when it gets in peer review. And also tools to support the publisher, that's moving content into production.
Right. Right.
So, identifying the level of copy editing that might be required in order to bring it to the kind of standard that's needed. But the thing is, there's so many different use cases. And the great thing about these tools is that they can be adapted according to the use case of the individual publisher.
Right. So, Tony, technology obviously helps publishers and researchers, but there is obviously it's a double-edged sword. And some of the things that we plan to talk about in this show are about let's say the bad side of technology. So let's start with the first topic, which I think you identified. So let me know if you can see my screen properly. So we have several talking points for the episode 1 of Upshots. So the first one is related to the black market regarding academic and reference citations. So, Tony, you were very enthusiastic. You said that we have to talk about it. So, could you walk us through the entire story?
Well, I'm not sure I'm particularly perfectly positioned to talk about it. The concerns that publishers have,
right,
is that AI can be misused, that AI can be used to falsify research, writing false papers, and in this particular instance, the concern that publishers have about false papers being created, false authors being created,
yes,
selling citations in order to boost the visibility or the citation performance of any given piece of content. And I think the article that you're showing in Nature is just a really good example of some of the practices that are increasingly coming out that publishers have to be aware of and that authors have to be aware of in terms of when they're engaging with publishers. What are publishers going to ask about? What are they looking for?
Right. But Tony, I made a mistake in not changing the name or the title, so I'm going to ask you to speak for another 30 seconds. So continue speaking about this piece, please. I'll just
sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, I had one publisher recently come to me and say, was I aware of this with this practice? I think this practice isn't particularly new, unfortunately, but the reality is the use of certain AI tools, unfortunately, is helping to increase the ease of manipulating the whole process. Right. Creating fake scientists, creating fake papers, creating fake researchers, and I think it's a real concern. I mean, my biggest concern about some of these tools isn't the specific use case, but it's the overall impact.
Right.
The fact that a question starts coming into mind is how valid is this paper that I'm reading?
Right.
And if they can't believe in the validity of the research, it kind of undermines the whole the integrity of academic publishing.
Right. So I'll just like to summarize the paper. So that episode is titled "No More I Cite You." It is a reference to an Annie Lennox song back from the 1980s, and we both, Tony,
great song.
Yeah, you and I are both fans of popular music, and I think it was a playful sort of take on that song.
Yeah.
So the idea behind this is that we can buy citations, and there's a black market for it. So what this research paper, or rather this story from Nature is reporting, is that somebody created a fake Google Scholar profile, and they then invited citations to that profile in published index journals. That eventually led to the fake profile getting high boosts in citations, and basically they exposed a loophole, or a loophole in the entire citation indexing things. And this is just one study. There are other apparently other studies which report a broader concern about citation manipulation, with about 1,000 suspicious profiles of researchers. So this is a valid concern for both researchers, the publishers, as well as for the general public. Science is built on the trust and integrity, and if suppose you have fake profiles, it is possibly not something that we want. So do you think that publishers, or maybe researchers, or maybe even institutions need to adopt something to some different policies to prevent this from happening?
I don't think there's any question that if you're being given a grant by a funding agency, by a reputable funding agency, by your own organization, you need to adhere to rules around integrity, in terms of what you can and can't do.
Right.
And I think things like this are an example that people are trying to bypass those rules.
Right.
And in our very small little research ecosystem, one bad apple spoils everything else, and it starts putting into question everything that is coming through. So yes, I do think there should be something in the contract between the researcher and the funder, the researcher and the organization, where the researcher agrees to adhere and play by the rules.
Right. And one thing that I can tell you, I mean, I'm part of the technology team. I look for innovative technology-based solutions for such things. So one thing that we can look at is probably having an AI-based or technology which can detect whether a cited author or a citation going to an individual or is actually going to the right individuals. For example, my name is KK. There could be other KKs, and they could be fake KKs. And if somebody can ensure that the paper that I am submitting is actually written by me by using whatever, let's say, author disambiguation, author verification methods, maybe that is a technology solutions that the publishers and the research community would welcome.
And publishers are starting to invest serious sums of money in terms of acquiring tools that will help them to identify, possible manipulated content.
Right. So
whether it's this, whether it's image manipulation detection, it's all kind of part of the kind of the policing that publishers now have to do more and more of. I mean, you just have to look at the kind of the work that's happening in things like the number of papers that are being retracted today compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The tools exist now to be able to identify, whether a paper should be manipulated, has been manipulated.
Right. So that I think we should move on to our next topic, which is also related to AI and content licensing. So, Tony, I'll switch to the news item and I'll briefly introduce the audience to this. So,
Yeah.
a couple of months ago, Taylor and Francis, if I'm not mistaken, entered into an open agreement with, I think, Microsoft in terms of using its content, the content that from research content that it has. It is being used for, let's say, to be trained, so for training Microsoft's, let's say, AI products, etc. And that was met with a lot of resistance. I mean, it is something, whose even though the copyrights are transferred by the authors onto the publishers, but still the content cannot be simply used for, let's say, AI licensing. This is, I think, the majority, the consensus from the research community. Is that how you interpreted it when the news came out, when T&F announced
Oh,
this?
I think I think this is actually a good thing. I think the fact that these large publishers are now looking to license their content so that they can train AIs,
Right.
Is only going to improve the quality of the AIs moving forward.
Right. So, however, what we have this week is that Wiley and Oxford University Press have confirmed AI partnerships. And I did my research. I could not identify who they have partnered with. And Cambridge University Press has offered an opt-in for, I think, authors to opt in whether their content can be used for training. So, what do you think of this from a research community point of view, especially maybe from, let's say, what are you hearing in the UK in the researcher front about this?
I don't personally think there's any real risk for the academic community. It's in a sense, it's no different from a journal being indexed.
Right.
The full text of an article being indexed in one of the large industry-wide databases.
Mm-hmm.
It's just another way of supporting discovery. So, if an author has concerns around their intellectual property, they have to then review the what they've already signed away or signed off with the publisher in terms of what rights they have and they retain, and what rights the publisher has. If they've already assigned the rights to use the content to the publisher, then there may not be a great deal that they can do. So they should, if they have any concerns, they should review the contract that they have.
Yeah, so the argument for such training is that obviously AI is known to be inaccurate, right? And scientific research needs accurate AI. And the more, let's say, scientific content is used for training, the better the product and the output will be, which is useful for researchers themselves to help improve their workflow so that they can do things more efficiently with more accuracy, and so that they can get away from the mundane routine tasks. Maybe AI can help them with that, and they can focus instead on being novel, creative research related projects. So I think there is a positive spin to this. I would like to think positively when it comes to technology. So what do you think?
I think it can only be seen as a positive thing. By licensing, we're formally licensing and entering into agreements with these very large publishers who have very significant bodies of content. It's only going to make the AI services that are being developed stronger.
Yes.
And more useful for the researcher. So I mean, I may be naive, but I don't think there is any risk, or there's much risk for the author, apart from the fact that their content is part and parcel of the bundle of content that's being used to train the AI.
Right. So I'm quoting Wiley here from this article from the bookseller. It says that to this end, we have entered into 2 agreements to leverage select previously published content for training these models being large language models. And we are committed to ensuring that authors and societies benefit from these deals through compensation and rights protection. So they are also taking care of it. And it is in accordance with the existing contracts.
Existing contracts, yeah.
So I think, so it is concerning in the sense that, I think there has to be, researchers need to be saying yes to this. And that's an opt-in that I think Cambridge University Press.
And in a sense, KK, it's an extension of what's been happening for years in other types of licensing arrangements. I mean, typically, I realize it's not quite the same thing, but typically a publisher will enter into a license with a licensing agency who will make content available to organizations that don't subscribe to their content. So there could be a photocopying agreement. There could be an electronic use agreement. There's all sorts of different license types. And in a sense, this is no different from that. but I can understand the concerns that publishers have in terms of how their research might be being used.
Right.
So my advice is always to sort of refer back to the contract they have with the publisher.
Right. And in a related but not quite academic content related news, OpenAI announced content deal with Condé Nast, which is basically, can you explain what the content under this umbrella would be like?
Well, Condé Nast is a trade and a consumer publisher, and they, as you see here, they publish things like the New Yorker, GQ, Vogue.
Yes.
So again, it's content which is going to be used and visible through the different AI, and I think it's an interesting agreement to make.
Right.
I'd like to see how they're actually going to differentiate using this content, the sort of services that they're being produced.
Yes, in our pre-show meeting, when we discussed, what we are going to talk about, you said that this is not quite relevant to academic publishing, and the reason why I thought we should talk about this is because there are lawsuits between, let's say, New York Times and book writers and everything against with OpenAI, and the results, the outcomes of these lawsuits are going to define how AI products are going to be trained, what kind of content goes in and everything. I thought it was relevant from that point of view, and because this is, let's say, a non-academic content which is being used to train, let's say, large language models, and eventually for search GPT as OpenAI search engine type, let's say the I guess the product that they're going to come out with. So it is relevant in the sense that if researchers are indeed using, let's say, OpenAI or Gemini for their research purposes, if it's not trained on actual academic content, then you have a higher chance of the outputs being scientifically inaccurate, and that's a concern, right? And that's what we just discussed, that if suppose the research content itself is being used for training these large language models, the output will be better.
It's not just research content that goes through this kind of rigor. The sort of the content that's being published in the likes of Condé Nast and other sort of trade publishers will also go through a level of editorial rigor before it's released. So we know that the quality of what's being produced by these publishers is generally going to be very high.
Right, but what
and reliable.
Yes, what I was going for is that if suppose, let's say, I'm sure that some research, some people in our audience would be, let's say, going to Gemini or ChatGPT and asking for, let's say, sourced summaries of something, let's say some research that they're doing. So currently, as of let's say in late August 2024, all of these outputs that classical large language models are giving may not be accurate. There might be a chance of hallucinations and inaccurate citations, and we don't want that to happen. And so that's what I was going for, in terms of not that the content from New Yorker and, let's say, Vogue, etc. They're also obviously let's say reviewed and everything. They're high quality in terms of English, but what scientific researchers and academicians are looking for is reliable sourcing of content.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yes. So those were two interesting sort of.
And I will say, and this is just going to be the first.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that Condé Nast, Oxford University Press, Cambridge, Wiley, Taylor & Francis, etc. You can be certain that these conversations are happening across the board with a very large number of publishers.
Right. And again, on the lines of AI and scientific research, we have a news article, which is, I think it was published in Nature, but it's behind a paywall. The article is about AI firms publishing world's most highly cited work. And so I have another copy of this article. So I'll just summarize it for you. It is basically saying that I think the tech giants Alphabet, which is the super brand of Google, and Microsoft lead in terms of highly cited AI research, while Chinese companies Baidu and Tencent excel in AI patent findings. So I found this interesting, Tony, in the sense that AI is always being talked about in the context of research because of inaccuracies, but AI firms like Google and Alphabet are also publishing a lot of cited research. So what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, it doesn't surprise me at all. These are the companies that are leading the way in terms of the public understanding and application of AI technology. So the fact that their research is actually the most highly cited is, I think, just reaffirms, their position in the market.
And this information is based out of PARAT, Parrot, the private sector AI related activity tracker. So this is interesting. I hadn't known about this sort of a thing. I think if you are a researcher, you must also be aware, as in keep yourself aware of the fact that AI companies are also producing scientific content. And I'm very interested to see how things develop. I think Google, Microsoft with the partnership with OpenAI are leaders, but there are many other sort of language model companies. For example, Anthropic, which has Cloud, and Mistral. These are other AI brands that I'm expecting them to also have a lot of research related, cited research papers, I would say. So this is interesting, I thought. And so this is the third third topic that we want to talk about. And then there is another AI related thing, but this one, I think, Tony, I would let you raise your concern. So this is a news article. Gmail can turn rough notes into a full draft with Gemini polish. And when we talked about it, you wondered whether it's Polish or Polish, right? So
Gemini Polish wouldn't be quite so concerning. I think it's an interesting development. Obviously, we'd like every author in the world where English isn't the first language to have tools available to them to make their writing as good as possible. And I think in certain cases, certain types of writing, AI tools like this are kind of almost, if you like, an extension to sort of spell checkers and sort of the kind of editing you do on Microsoft Word.
Right.
Where my concerns come in is when that polishing is then impacting on scientific writing, on medical writing.
Right.
How good is that paper going to be using these tools? And I think the jury, to a certain extent, is still out.
Right. And the good news, at least from an academic, product point of view, is that Google is currently offering this as part of Gmail. You can see it is the screenshot that they've shared is within a mobile Gmail application. And this feature, the polish feature, is available as a feature on Android, iOS, and the web. So the way that I see it, it is something like, when you are, it's like an autocorrect. If even Google, when you start typing in Gmail, if you write something, then it'll help you. It'll suggest some content that you can use to flesh out the sentence. So this will be a couple of steps ahead. And it'll probably help, let's say, take the burden off communicators, anybody, but researchers as well, when they are trying to communicate about their research, with, let's say, their collaborators or maybe something like that, something of that sort. So it is going to take away some of the burden in terms of communication. But yeah. But at the same time, we are wondering if Google will eventually turn their attention towards scientific content generation, because that's a big controversial topic, is it not? LLMs, because they lack accuracy, and how people are probably abusing large language models to output content.
I'd love to know what their technology roadmap looks like.
Yes, I mean, I guess you are aware, Tony, that a lot of research paper, peer-reviewed research, has evidence of the text being generated from large language models, right? So, I mean, from that point of view, researchers are already using it. I think if a tool is made available to anyone, I think they will start using it. But we need guidelines and best practices, and maybe dedicated, products which are meant for academic writing, right?
And I think that the important thing for researchers to bear in mind is that, I mean, if we go back to that principle of how can AI be used in research, if you've got any doubts at all, if you're a researcher thinking about writing a paper and you have used an AI or a generative AI to help you to draft that paper, is check what the publisher allows you to do and not to do. Pretty much every major publisher is saying if you're going to use a Gen AI like ChatGPT or something, you have to declare that, you have to acknowledge that.
Right.
How the publisher then treats that later on will not be the same from publisher to publisher.
Right.
Some publishers will outright refuse to accept any paper that's got more than a certain percentage of AI generated content in there. So I think, if you've got any questions at all, refer to the guidelines that the publisher is setting out in terms of what you're allowed to do as part of your submission.
Yes. So this is a 9 to 5 Google article that I'm sharing. It also explains that there will be a help me write shortcut in the body of a draft. of the Gmail app. It will help you write this. So anyway, I don't think this is of concern, but I think I'm curious to explore this when I write something on my email,
Yeah.
on the Gmail app on my mobile
Yeah,
phone.
maybe we can talk about it next time we speak.
Yes, let me try it
What
out
your,
and
what your
see.
results are.
Yes, yes. And for that brings us to the last topic that we have. It is related to research funding, related to science communication. So, Tony, I thought was an interesting article.
Yeah.
Another article in Nature. So it basically says that I think let me try to summarize, and I'll ask you your thoughts on this. So the article basically states that funding for research is available, but there is not enough sufficient, let's say, quota or the percentage of that funding being allocated to science communication, whatever it might be, for communicating, let's say, for lay summaries or whatever, science communication in a public press release or something. And if you have that, then it'll be beneficial, because the science and the research outcomes will reach more people and the wider audience, which will then channel back to future research being well funded. So what are your thoughts on this article?
Well, I read this article last week, and I kind of thought this isn't a particularly a new story in a sense, because I mean, when I worked in publishing and I worked for large societies and professional organizations, 10, 15 years ago, we were having conversations about the public understanding of science, and how increasingly research grants and the measurement of research effectiveness includes what impact does this research have? Right. One measure is what impact does it have on the immediate research community? Secondly, what impact it has on the broader scientific community? And thirdly, and importantly, what impact does this science have? Does this research have on the general public?
Right.
I remember visiting a university up in Scotland years ago, and they were talking about how this was in the medical school, how the research that they were doing could be translated and communicated to the local community in Scotland. Right. And they were thinking about, and this would impact on how that research is being measured, the effectiveness of that research, and ultimately impact their overall research score within the research excellence framework, which might impact on their funding.
Right.
So this is nothing new, but I think the use of technology is making this even easier. And then as you said earlier on, you touched on this. Publishers are talking to us all the time about what we can do to help them to communicate their research.
Right.
So we've got a whole range of tools that we offer that can do that, and services that we can do that.
Yeah, I've highlighted one piece of text here. So basically, this is an interview of a researcher, I think, and the researcher says that funding opportunities for science communication are sparse, especially compared with those in the interviewer, as in interviewee's areas of research. The interview says that although she has received some funding that she can put towards financing the videos she posts on social media, many funders prefer work that has some sort of visible output or data point. So that's another thing. As in, why should you care? As in, I think videos, messages on social media, let's say TikTok, for example, are powerful communication media to have scientific outreach out there. So I think funders should also take into account that as the society evolves, as technology evolves, the means to share will also keep on changing, and they cannot say that you cannot use it for video, instead you have to use it for a press release or something like that. So I thought it was interesting. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, it doesn't surprise me. And if someone like Corbett Hilaire, who's one of the leading voices in the whole COVID research and the vaccine research for COVID, is struggling or isn't able to obtain this sort of funding, I kind of had, what does it mean for the rest of the world, who aren't quite so visible?
Yes.
No, I think it's absolutely important. Every research grant should have an element of, what are you going to be able to do to be able to help you to then communicate your research effectively to the community, and the audiences that they want to reach will vary from research type to research type, but there has to be some element of communication. Otherwise, the research will just remain hidden and not cited.
So the takeaways from this for me when I read it would be that the researchers are encouraged to take science communication a little more seriously and spend some time on it, but be also pragmatic. And eventually you'll have to demonstrate the usefulness of the science communication funding that you received, etc. So eventually it is sort of a give and take. And I would think that, this article was at least eye-opening for me. As you mentioned, it's such a prominent COVID researcher is struggling to get funding.
But it's not a new area,
right?
KK. I mean, when I worked in, I I used to work in physics publishing, and 30 years ago in physics publishing, and longer, that we had a journal specifically about the public understanding of science.
Right.
Using whatever technologies and methods were available at the time, but it was still seen as a hot topic. And all that's happening today is that these tools are just making it easier.
Right.
I think one of the challenges is that if everyone is going to be communicating their research in this way, what can the researcher do to make their research stand out from the rest of the crowd? And it still comes down at the end of the day is how good and how novel is my research, and what is it, and am I clear in terms of what this research means for the general public, and also in terms of how it moves science and research in my field forward?
Right. One sort of last thought that I have on this is that AI again can be very useful for researchers to figure out how to communicate. For research impact content, for maybe making, let's say, lay summaries out of their manuscripts and everything, or maybe making posts on social media, or generating outlines for their speeches and everything. So AI has a lot of potential in this thing, and I think if people like Trinka's team is figuring out ways to get that out so that researchers can use Trinka's different products to use use them and to generate some content that they can use for improving their research impacts. So we are excited. Go on.
And I was going to say, and we've been involved in projects like that where we've taken content that's been maybe written by AI, maybe written by a human, I don't know, but we've used our own translation technologies and methods to create multilingual versions of that content, of those summaries, so that you're not just communicating it to an English language audience, you're communicating it to a much broader global audience.
So lots of exciting times ahead, but that has to that is the last story that we wanted to cover. So I'll go back to our full screen videos again. As I said, I did not change the title, so I'll have to resize the title a little. Okay, I think I've done resizing. So Tony, so this was an interesting experience for me. This is just so natural between the two of us to talk about science and technology and publishing. So having said that, you had a summer bank holiday yesterday, and it was a long weekend. So
yeah, I did.
Did you do something interesting?
Well, I did something which I wasn't planning to do, and I helped my daughter buy a car.
What kind of car?
She ended up buying a Hyundai. I can't remember what the model is. i10. It was a very nice little sort of. She's got a car. It's a bit old, and she's just changing jobs. So my bank holiday was committed to helping my daughter get a new car.
And
that was exciting.
Is that a hybrid? Is that an electric vehicle?
No, I think this one's pure. I think this was petrol only.
Okay. All right. So, and I'm aware that you might be buying a guitar, and you're lusting after a guitar.
Yeah, I'm always lusting after guitars. KK. Unfortunately, that's my weakness is guitars. No, there is a kind of a smart guitar that's been starting coming out in the last few years called a lava guitar. They made it in China. And they're very clever. And I've been looking at buying one of those. Yeah, I haven't done it yet. I will. I mean, I know if it's in the top of my head, it's going to burn a hole in my pocket until I actually spend the money. And
I myself, I think I've told you this, but I have got my Yamaha FX280. It is a new acoustic, semi-acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
So I have other guitars. Scott is the best acoustic guitar that I have. So Yamaha, I had an older Yamaha which was coming apart and the bridge came off. So I decided to get myself. So I'm enjoying playing with it. And I wanted to ask you, this weekend, the last weekend, I went and watched Alien Romulus. Have you watched? Are you interested in science fiction?
I do like the Alien films, and I do want to see this. So it's on my wish list of films to see. I haven't seen it yet, but no, I always like the Alien films. They've always maintained their standard.
Yeah, so I would without any.
Would you recommend it?
I am a big fan of Alien, the original movie, 1979, and I'm a big fan of the franchise. But at the same time, this movie is exceptional in special effects. But I would not put it at that rung the first two movies had. So it is a good movie to watch.
Let me tell you, I saw Alien, the original Alien film, at a midnight showing in the town where I lived in 1979, when it first came out. And I can't tell you how scared I was walking home in the middle of the night in the dark, having seen this film.
Okay, so I unfortunately that was a year that I was born. So I was born a few months after.
You didn't see it.
Yeah, I know. I saw it. I think in the early 2000s or something when I was catching.
I was only a baby.
So that's something interesting that I did. The guitar is really nice, and this was a fun conversation. So I'm looking
I'll
forward
see
to
you in the next one.
Yes, we will have we're hoping to have weekly episodes of PubShorts. So this was our first episode, and before we part, we take leave from the audience. Tony, where if somebody is interested in knowing more about your work, where can they find you?
They can just write to me at the Enago website, tonyo@enago.com. And can I also say, if anyone watching this has got any topics you'd like us to talk about,
Yeah.
Please send them through to either KK or me.
Yes.
Either at, you can, I'm certainly via the Enago website.
Right, and so Tony mentioned that you can write to us. So we are streaming live on YouTube, so you can leave comments on the YouTube channel, or you can find either Enago or Trinka on any social media platform. Let's say LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even Weibo and WeChat. Wherever you can find us, leave us a note. Let us know what you liked, what you would like Tony and I to cover in the future episodes. And for me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am generally not active on social media despite being a musician, but I'm working on it. And you can find me on Twitter as well. But this is at LinkedIn and Twitter is where you can find me. You can search for my full name. I think the full name is visible. So until the next episode, Tony, this is me saying bye. You have any parting thoughts?
No. Bye.
Okay.
Have a good few weeks until the next one.
Well, we sure hope to have another episode maybe next week. So anyway, so until the next episode, this is Tony and KK. This is PubShorts episode number 1, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye.